Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to unpack a really provocative argument about Bengali identity. The whole idea is this: what if the history that many Bengalis know isn't, well, the real story? What if it's something else entirely? A weapon, even, that was built during the colonial era for one specific purpose: to control people.
And that really is the heart of it, isn't it? Can history actually be a weapon? According to the argument we're exploring today, the answer is a resounding yes. It's a tool that can be used not just to look back at the past, but to dominate the present and completely steer the future of an entire people.
Okay, so how was this so-called weapon of history even created? Well, the argument we're looking at is really built on this key concept from the scholar Edward's side, and it's called Orientalism. This theory is presented as the intellectual blueprint for the entire colonial project. So, what exactly is Orientalism? Well, at its core, it's the idea that for centuries, the West didn't just misunderstand the East. It actively constructed this biased, distorted, and usually negative image of it. And this wasn't an accident. No, it was a full-blown intellectual project designed to paint the people of the East as inferior, irrational, and, you guessed it, in desperate need of a Western civilizing touch.
And these weren't just vague ideas. They became really specific stereotypes. The Oriental was supposedly lazy, despotic, chaotic, and uncivilized. Now, this wasn't just some dusty academic theory. It became a powerful political tool. It gave colonial powers the justification they needed to march in and say, look, it's our moral duty to be here, to occupy these lands and fix these people.
This quote just nails the whole idea, doesn't it? The colonial powers, they weren't really interested in the day-to-day reality of people living in Bengal. Their picture of the East was shaped by centuries of biased books sitting in their own libraries, an image that was basically tailor-made to serve their own colonial goals. All right, let's bring this home and see how this theory of Orientalism actually played out on the ground in Bengal. Because the colonial project there wasn't just about taking over land, it was about taking over minds. So, the first move in this playbook, according to the argument, was to completely dismantle the existing power structure. You see, before the British arrived, farmers actually held the rights to their land. But the British came in and just transferred that ownership to a whole new class of landlords. And here's the really crucial part: they seized all the Lahiraj land. Now, this was land that was tax-free, specifically set aside to fund the schools, the mosques, the entire cultural and educational backbone of the Muslim community. By taking that away, they basically bankrupted their whole social infrastructure almost overnight. And get this economic attack went hand in hand with an intellectual one. Thomas Macaulay, in his famous 1835 memo on education, he spelled it out in black and white. The plan was to create a new elite, a class of local agents who would be, for all intents and purposes, British in everything but their skin color. The goal couldn't have been more clear: create a buffer class, a group of intermediaries who would spread British ideals and make colonial rule look not just necessary, but actually good for them. And it was this newly created Calcutta-based elite, so the argument goes, that would be handed the pen to write a completely new history for Bengal. And this brings us to what's presented as the most lasting, most damaging part of the whole colonial project: the complete and total rewriting of Bengal's past to make it fit this new political reality. You see, the argument is that before this time, the region's history was actually pretty well documented in written chronicles. Things like the Tabakat-i Nasiri. These were detailed, factual accounts of rulers and society. But the new colonial-era elite, they started pushing these aside. And what did they replace them with? Mythological and religious stories from the Puranas, which they then started presenting as actual history. The argument points to influential figures like Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, a really prominent writer at the time. He's said to have just dismissed centuries of documented Muslim history as, and I'm paraphrasing here, nothing more than stories of kings feasting. You can see how a move like that just completely delegitimizes one entire historical record while propping up another. And then came 1872. The British conducted their first official census, and boy, did it throw a wrench in the works. The results came back, and they revealed something that created a huge problem for this new narrative. The majority of people in Bengal were, in fact, Muslim.
So how do you explain that? Well, a new theory was spun up, and it spread fast. The explanation was this: the huge Muslim population, they must be the descendants of low-caste Hindus who converted. And according to the argument we're exploring, that one idea, that single theory, inflicted this deep and lasting inferiority complex on Bengali Muslims that would stick around for generations. But what if there's another story? A counter-narrative is offered, and this one is based on much, much older sources. Sources from outside observers that were written long before Islam or the colonial project ever came to the region.
What's really incredible here is how consistent these ancient accounts are. We're talking about Greek and Chinese travelers writing centuries apart, and they all describe a land that is distinctly, well, not Hindu. Foxian and Xuanzang especially, they paint this vivid picture of a thriving Buddhist society, just filled with countless monasteries and monks. So based on those external chronicles, this is the picture of 7th century Bengal that starts to emerge. It was, in this view, an overwhelmingly Buddhist and Jain region. According to these ancient texts, there's just no mention of a significant organized Hindu presence there at that time. And this leads to a pretty radical rethinking of the whole conversion story. In this version of events, Bengali Muslims are not primarily descendants of low-caste Hindus. Instead, they are the descendants of high-status, educated Buddhists who actually welcomed the arriving Muslims as allies because they found common ground in principles like equality and opposition to idol worship.
So, why does any of this matter today? I mean, it's ancient history, right? Well, because this historical debate connects directly to a very real, very modern identity crisis. This isn't just an academic squabble about the past. It has huge implications for the present.
The argument is that this historical revisionism didn't just stay in the history books. It created 3 fundamental crises that are still felt today: a distorted history that wipes out a proud Buddhist past, an altered language that was purified of its natural influences, and what that all leads to, a confused and conflicted sense of who you are.
This right here captures the alternative vision of Bengali identity being put forward. In this view, real Bengali heritage isn't one thing or the other. It's a rich synthesis, right? A beautiful blend of the region's native Buddhist roots with cultural traditions that flowed in from Central Asia, Persia, and Arabia.
And so we're left with this really powerful question. It just forces you to think about the immense power of the stories we tell. Because if our past is what defines us, what happens when that past is rewritten? It doesn't just change yesterday, it changes who we are today and who we have the chance to become tomorrow.